Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Kidney Coach YouTube channel. I am naturopath Fiona Chin, co-founder of Kidney Coach and Kaigenesis, a range of natural supplements designed to support people with chronic or diagnosed with chronic kidney disease have better kidney function. Welcome to the YouTube channel. I'm joined again today by one of my favorite people in the entire world, the beautiful Stephanie Modavis. Stephanie has actually joined the Kidney Coach team as one of our health coaches, and she does that because she is very, very well, what's the word I'm looking for, qualified to be able to support people through their kidney disease. And it's a little bit about what we're going to talk about today, but Stephanie's had her own amazing health journey. She's a health coach, yoga teacher. She has delved into so many courses and trainings on just helping better support people through the healing journey. She's very well educated in the healthcare system. She works in hospitals and actually does patient management and sits alongside the teams there. But what makes Stephanie truly exceptional is she's gone through 2 transplants herself and is this amazing, healthy, beautiful, vibrant being that's come out the other side. But she has proper lived experience. And actually, before we hit record, Stephanie and I were down the rabbit hole of how invaluable lived experience is versus, say, a clinician or a nephrologist that has never experienced kidney disease versus it being lived and breathed. So I'm rambling, but Stephanie, thank you for joining me again. I always like to highlight how qualified you are for people listening, because it really sits far beyond just your amazing qualifications and everything that you have and trying to change the healthcare system from the inside out. I know that's a constant battle for you every day, but you have got lived, breathed experience. So you are invaluable.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. And yeah, the lived experience, anyone listening to this broadcast who is a patient, they want to be heard. They want their journey to have meaning at some point. They're trying to seek for that deeper meaning, and they want their voice and their story to be validated. So the patient experience is really, I feel, one of the greatest wisdoms that can be garnered within this journey. And anybody listening who's gone through kidney disease or is facing kidney disease, you have some information that your doctor doesn't, which is how do you navigate? What is it like to live with it? And what do you do to try to support yourself through it? So thanks so much.
No worries. So this is a topic that I really have been wanting you and I to do for a while, because I feel like it's one that only you and I could do together. And that's, I'm going to use the 4-minute mile, the 100th monkey syndrome. And, it was interesting. I had a meeting this morning with someone about this. They were just asking about our company and what we did for another podcast. And, it got onto the topic of like 15 years ago when Duncan and I started this, when we first put up like Facebook ads or ads on Google to get people to come look at the website. And at that time, it was just the ebook. We got slammed. Like, you cannot reverse kidney disease. It's all snake oil. How dare you give people with kidney disease false hope? And in those early days, and this is 15 years ago, it was really hard work. And of course, we'd seen it in patients. Duncan and I are both clinical naturopaths. We've been in clinical practice. I've been in clinical practice for like 25 years now. And so I'd seen patients reverse kidney disease. And I'm like, where's this rhetoric about kidney disease being incurable coming from? And, we've stuck at the journey. And I was saying to you before we hit record, it's amazing now if someone ever says that on Facebook or something, now our community will get on and say, well, we don't have to say anything anymore. They're like, actually, we have reversed our kidney disease following the program. Our EGFR's gone from this, and we've got amazing testimonials and all of those sort of things. But there is an information bias, and this is, and I'm going to hand it over to you, Steph, but, there's this information bias that I'd love you to talk about that, number one, if you don't want to heal, it's a very good story to stick to, because it does take a lot of work far beyond swallowing a pill to heal your kidneys. But we now know kidney disease is reversible. I have to say that and put it out there. I've just written 2 chapters for Springer Nature, which is a big medical textbook. It'll be published this year. And that is integrative treatment for kidney disease. It's going into medical schools. All the new nephrologists coming through are going to be trained on it. I've got 2 chapters in there along with Jesse Anna and some of the other team I podcast with. I know a lot of the authors. And it's the new rhetoric that kidney disease is reversible. But it's going to take 15 years for the medical community to catch up. In the meantime, it's up to someone amazing like you, Stephanie, to help change this voice, because I think it's really important. And that brings me back to what I was talking about before, the 100th monkey syndrome and the 4-minute mile. So I'm going to hand it over to you to delve into what that means and how that relates to what we're talking about. But really, my mission it's a big mission. The big part that we're trying to do at kidney disease, forget, just supporting people with reversing kidney disease, which we know we do. For us, it's really about changing this narrative that in the first place, people actually have options. It's to you.
All right, great. We're going to start a presentation here today. Per your suggestion, I like the idea of talking about the 4-minute mile and the 100th monkey syndrome because beyond, sharing the rhetoric that we can actually reverse kidney disease, and in fact, many other diseases, is this, upstream narrative that if you're against something new, if you're indoctrinated in a particular mindset, it's going to be a longer time until we can start to adopt some evolution. And in the meantime, what's happening is that our fear is limiting potential for patients and maybe even contributing to worse. So, we want to be practical. I know that years ago and even beyond that, the information with belief might have been a little too high. It might have sounded a little too woo-woo, just change your belief and change your life. There is facts threaded within that statement, but we have to take a practical, scientific look at this as well, which is what you guys are doing. But then there also still is a huge psychological component to actually helping the healthcare system adopt a new belief, a new way of being. So I wanted to do this presentation per your suggestion. So it's called The Psychology and Relationship of Personal and Systemic Change. And the cool thing is we're going to talk about the 4-minute mile and Roger Bannister to start because it's just an amazing story. So for those who don't know, or you want to be, reminded, Roger Bannister broke the 4-minute mile on May 6th, a feat previously deemed impossible. His achievement was as much psychological as it was physical. And within a year, multiple runners also broke this barrier, proving the power of belief. So as I go through this presentation now, I'm going to talk about Roger a little bit, but I want everybody to start to open their mind and their perspective a little bit to understand that this is about overcoming anything that someone has deemed impossible. Anything in anybody's life. Whenever anybody has said something to you and has said, absolutely no, this is impossible, no matter what it's about, I want you to open your mind. And specifically, we're going to talk to and compare this to the healthcare system. Any system it can apply to, because we all have rigid, dogmatic beliefs and education that trains in one way, and evolution and change is very difficult because the whole system often has to change. The whole educational model has to change, even if these little changes come in. So we have to have a willingness to give over our own will and really have to understand that maybe there's something higher trying to break its way in. And that requires a lot, right? So I added this in here. I wanted to play this for you guys because I rewatched this myself. It's just a couple of minutes and it's really, really mind-blowing. And again, I want you to just kind of think about this perspective of not just Roger breaking the boundaries on running, right? And breaking the 4-minute mile, but what if we applied this same philosophy in all of our other systems? So
the doctors told him, your heart will explode. Please don't do it. That's what Roger Bannister heard when he decided to try to break the world record for running 1 mile. See, doctors said that it was physically impossible to run a mile in under 4 minutes. And yes, they told Roger Bannister that his heart would explode in the process. Why? Because no one had ever done it before. It seemed like an impossible feat, one that was more than the human body was capable of achieving. And for the longest time, no one even tried to run a mile in under 4 minutes because they accepted that it was impossible. But that was until May 6, 1954, when Roger Bannister ran the mile in just under 4 minutes. And guess what? He didn't die. And on that day, he made the impossible possible. Do you want to know the most amazing part about that story though? Within 4 years of running that 4-minute mile, 20 more people recorded a mile in under 4 minutes. Think about that for a second. For thousands of years, no human ever ran a mile in under 4 minutes. And then once one person proved that it was possible, 20 more people did it. Now, did the human body magically evolve over those 4 years so that people could run faster? No, people finally believed that it was possible because someone else had done it. In their minds, it switched from impossible to possible, proving that people were limiting themselves based on what others had said or based on what others had done. It all starts up here before it can happen out here. This is very important for us to realize, because how often do we not go after what we truly want for ourselves because of what we think is possible for ourselves, or because it seems impossible based on what we've done in our past? And how often do we not go after our goals because of other people telling us what we can and cannot do? See, in order for us to do something that we've never done, we must first believe that we can do it up here. We have to focus on the goal that we have for ourselves and block out all of the people who try to tell us what is possible. So, what do you want to do? What is it that you've been holding yourself back from doing based on what you've done in your past or what other people have said to you or your own self-limiting beliefs? Because just like the 4-minute mile, everything in this world was once impossible until one person proved that it was possible. So, what's your impossible? Because your limits are just decisions, not facts. Hey everybody, thanks so much for watching this video. If you loved it, please do me a favor, hit that share button down below so that more people can get more messages like this. And if you want to follow along, you can go ahead and follow my page. I have new videos that come out every single week. But until then, I appreciate you, and I hope that you guys have a great day.
Oh, good. And it's so true.
Yeah. So
he was told his heart would explode if he did it. Like, now we look back and we go, that's crazy. And you look at Usain Bolt. But you and I go, it's crazy for someone to be told that they can't heal kidney disease. Same thing.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I can't tell you how many people I've spoke to who've said, you know, my doctor gave me three months to live, or, I mean, it goes on. And I think we need to, really need to be cautious of our languaging and understand that, you know, it's about the power of the mind. And if you're willing to change and do the work, I think that we can absolutely evolve this narrative of kidney disease and many other diseases. I'm not saying miraculous cures, but I'm saying with the proper work and the proper support and the proper mindset of both the patient and the provider and their supporting environment. Because in that video, like he said, if you're going to do something different, if you're going to do something impossible, then you better be careful of all the noise around you, because the noise is going to come. People are going to tell you you're crazy. What are you doing? What do you mean you can't heal your kidneys? It's impossible. Those people are this or that, or, you know, woo woo. Don't listen to them. You know, you're going to have so much judgment. So there has to be a willingness and a strength within the patient to understand the noise that's going to come at them right now, until we have more of those people, like in this video, who start to be able to prove and stand up and be public about, actually, now the results are coming in. There's a lot of people reversing kidney disease. So for me, I always think about the dangers of permanent labeling and deeming something impossible, because if your mind is at all impressionable, or you have people around you who hold a lot of authority over your own sovereign mind and thinking, it is going to make this process a lot harder. So in terms of evolving technology, healthcare, kidney care, we need to also support the patient going through it mentally and really set them up with a proper environment, not just internally, but I feel externally, to really be able to give this what it truly deserves, which is that medicine is going to look very different soon, hopefully, and so far as kidney care. So. All right. So this slide just talks about some pros and cons of.
Can you come up yet?
It didn't come up yet?
No.
Oh no.
Oh, there it is. Got it. Got it.
You got it? Okay. I'll have to
got it
for now. So, okay. So the pros and cons of labeling. Again, a limited diagnosis. MDs aren't typically taught a lot about the functional process. We all know this already. Yes, there are many brilliant doctors out there. We're not trying to demean anybody, but the fact is that there's so much interconnection between the mind, the body, the gut, the body, so many other factors, and they just simply aren't taught that, right? So when we label somebody who, somebody who has authority, a physician, a doctor, a PhD, you want to really give them the hierarchy because of that degree. But remember, be very clear that their education is actually quite limited. They may be very precise about something specific, but in terms of the holistic process and the interconnection of most things with that thing they are focusing on, it's typically not there. So you want to be mindful. And also down here, really important, what is it that's keeping us limited? For the providers, for the healthcare system, for the medical education system, for any of us personally, usually it has to do with fear. There's legal repercussions for doctors that they may be afraid of. There's a lot of cognitive dissonance when you are trained militaristically on this is how things are, and this is how medicine is, and this is how we do things here in the West. When you start being confronted with information that literally goes opposite of what you were trained, it really creates a lot of cognitive dissonance, which can create a lot of emotional dissonance as well, because you start to question things that don't feel good. Like, was really what I taught completely true? Are there things, could I potentially be doing things wrong or not giving my patients the chance that they really deserve? And it's much easier for people to squash those thoughts than to really explore them, especially when your community, your culture also has that same thought. Then not only are you having cognitive dissonance with what you were taught, but then you're facing a dissonance with almost your entire environment, which is really uncomfortable. So I
was going to say, absolutely. I mean, just to your thing, I think most people now know, if your doctor's saying, well, nutrition and change your diet doesn't work, they get no more. So a standard medical degree gives no more than 4 hours of nutritional training. How can you make a call of that? And then to your point, they get zero training unless they're going off the back of their to themselves to go and look into this further, which in fairness, some healthcare providers definitely do. But unless you're trained on everything that you're talking about, you're absolutely right. You don't know what you don't know, right? So you can't talk to things that you don't know anything about, but you can't talk absolutely about saying nutrition and stress and, mind-body connection doesn't play a role if you've had no training in it. You literally can't talk to that.
Yeah, you have to have training. And often I've discovered a physician or provider usually has to have their own personal experience as well for them to really pull them out of this mindset. But I can easily see how a physician might say with somebody that has kidney disease, well, your diet's not going to fix your kidneys because it's not just the diet. The diet is a piece. So that's, again, the whole issue with holistic medicine and holistic healthcare is that there's many interconnected parts that need to be in relationship with each other. So I can see how a doctor would poo-poo certain holistic practices because usually they're looking at one. They're not saying, well, what about diet and meditation and lifestyle changes, environment changes, and, biofeedback and it's like they don't have the capacity, because then it becomes really overwhelming and it really starts to challenge the whole way that they're approaching medicine. So it's complicated. So a lot of things keep us limited: cultural norms, trust the science. There's a big movement here in the West that may be changing as so far as JFK Jr. getting into the HHS as of today. But we were shamed deeply for misinformation, for not just trusting the science. And so, yeah, there's a lot going on here for sure right now. So hopefully this is going to shift a little bit. But specifically, I think we need to talk about some psychological barriers to the success of changing the healthcare system or helping to evolve or broaden the perspective of the healthcare system, at least. That might be more digestible to say, rather than saying, let's change healthcare, because there's a lot of good things about healthcare.
Absolutely.
How about holistic medicine is here to broaden our perspective and potential of what's possible? How about that? Right?
I love it. Yeah.
Yeah. So psychological barriers, again, the mindset of impossibility held runners back for decades. And I think that that same mindset is holding healthcare back. I mean, people who've been in the holistic healthcare space for quite a while, it's very easy to, again, not be demeaning, but to reductionistically say something such as healthcare feels like it's 10 years plus behind. Just because of the delay of the process and the progress and how long things take to get peer reviewed and the studies and the research, everything takes so long. But again, I can't even use that as the sole excuse right now. I think where we're at is that we need to encourage mindset shifts, broadening perspectives of the educational system within healthcare and the people within it. Right?
Totally agree.
Yeah. Bannister's belief was deemed impossible, flipped the mental model for athletes globally. And again, he was a little bit of an outlier in his space, right? He had to kind of go against what everyone was saying. And that's the same sort of philosophy I feel within a lot of the holistic healthcare space, is that we would like a relationship with this in-group of the system, but the reality is that there's a wall between us that's typically hard to traverse. And a lot of holistic providers sometimes may feel like an outlier to the traditional system. And in a way, that's good, because when you pull out from a system or a culture, you can look at it with fresh eyes without judgment, because you're not deeply embedded within that culture. So I always like to talk about developing a healthier relationship between holistic healthcare providers in the system for those that care. You can't have a holistic provider who's really disgruntled and angry at healthcare try to cultivate a healthier relationship with somebody within healthcare, and vice versa. So you need to actually find healthcare providers who want to push the boundaries and couple them with holistic providers who don't hate modern medicine and the system. So those people can really come together to create some sort of third attractor. That's how I see it. This movement really happening is in the relationship between the holistic and the traditional.
Yeah.
Psychological barriers often feel as physical ones, but it can be overcome with a shift in perspective. And again, I think this is where we're at. I linked this video here. If anybody wants to, pause this video or write this down, you might even be able to click on this. I'm not sure. I don't think so.
I'll put the link in the show notes for people.
Okay, cool. It's Rupert Sheldrake, who's a really interesting guy, and he's just discussing the limitations of scientific dogmatism. And in a way, it's not in a way to belittle per se, but it's educational. If you don't really understand how that belief system works into the mind and how it's hard to penetrate, it's a great, beautiful video to watch. So look at this poor guy. So obviously medicine, I have never worked in medicine. I've been in the system a lot over many years, but I do have a lot of friends who are doctors, nurses, and everything in between within the system. And burnout is very prevalent, really grinding to the degree where they can't really take breaks, they can't eat. They actually lose the ability to really take care of themselves very often, even outside of this system, because it's such a grind mentality. So I always feel a lot of compassion for people that I see within the system, because I think that they lose vision, again, because they're in the system, they're in that culture. I think they lose vision, not all of them, of how the system is really affecting them, and not just from an anger perspective, right? Or like a mental perspective. It's like system sucks, system doesn't care about me, but really how it has impacted them on an emotional level, on a physical level. I see a lot of providers who they can't work out as much as they usually can, and they start to put weight on. And I think they just can't see themselves. I don't think that the modern Western healthcare system has a proper feedback loop mirror for them to see themselves. And in fact, probably holistic healthcare providers might be the closest mirror, or their patients, for their own behavior and their own progress within the system. Again, we keep it very insulated and we normalize that. And then there's a lot of proselytizing and uplifting people within the system amongst themselves, right?
Yeah.
But then if they talk to somebody too far out of their culture, it gets tough to hear.
Mm-hmm.
So there's not really a proper feedback loop, because they're kind of stuck in there a lot. Most of them are really working hard. So yeah. What does it take to break these limits? We have to overcome our fear of failure and societal expectations, often keeping people from attempting breakthroughs. If you're really tired and burnt out, it's the worst time to try to have a true awakening and breakthrough within your life, because that takes energy, right?
Yeah.
Lack of belief in one's own ability reinforces self-imposed limitations. And I find that a lot with people that I met in healthcare. It's like they may be very high IQ or very intelligent in specific realms, but then in terms of their own emotions or really how they truly feel about themselves, when you get to know them better, I've heard physicians downright admit to me, that they have white coat syndrome, or not white coat, but the inverse of white coat syndrome, where the white coat gives them confidence because very often they feel like they have imposter syndrome.
Yes. Yep.
So how do providers really feel about themselves? Because sometimes you hear there's a lot of arrogance and hubris and narcissism within the healthcare field, but is the truth really that they actually don't have that great of personal confidence, or they don't feel that cool, so they have to act, in this role? So, yeah. And in healthcare, personal growth, rigid systems, and outdated models often hinder innovation and progress. We know that, often under the guise of progress, which this is the hardest thing for me to deal with, because you see this a lot, is like, oh, look at all the progress. Oh, we're breaking boundaries. Oh, we're the best hospital here and we're the best at this. There's this guise of doing good and progress, but I don't think they can see how it's not holistic. It's growth in a certain direction that they can see, but they can't see everything around it, which is really where the progress needs to happen. I think of AI in that sense, where yes, AI is going to help progress us all in certain ways, but it must be limited, and we must still advance our own human consciousness and our own human capability and ability, our own organic tech. We need that to evolve. And if that's not evolving in the same pace as our inorganic tech, we have a problem. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. We're in interesting times for sure with where this could go.
Yeah. So this is a little controversial, but I just wanted to put it out there. Let's get honest. We are all avoiding difficult truths that are hurting humanity at this time in history, right? Again, often under the auspices of wanting to protect humanity. Like, this is the weirdest thing. And I wanted to show this video, again, not to demean healthcare providers. I want to just share this few second clip of nurses and maybe doctors dancing during COVID, which is something that we saw, right? A lot of, I know here in the West, we saw this narrative of just like, this is what everybody's doing to survive the system during this time. And I came across this video and I just felt such a mix of emotions, and I'll play it for you and then we can discuss it. So tell me if you can see this and hear this. Yeah, okay.
Can't hear it, but can see it.
Can you hear it?
No, I can't hear it, but I can see it.
Okay.
Oh, there it is.
All right, I'm not going to play anymore since you can't hear it, but it's a fun little rap song. And I was watching this and I was just thinking to myself, number one is that when the majority of the public who maybe had family that were affected by COVID, or, you know, I don't think that they understand how they look to the public. They maybe wanted to project like, this is what we're trying to do to survive. We're so stressed out, and look, we're all going to learn a dance routine and it's going to become viral on TikTok. And, you know, I think that they were trying to project something that was positive during this time. But when I look at this, I mean, there's things I visually see. The first thing I see in the healthcare field here is that most of these people are overweight. And I'm just going to say that this is the healthcare field. And in my opinion, is that when we have a specialty or job or calling, we want to try as best as we can to be good demonstrators of that model. Right. And I can't tell you how many healthcare providers I know struggle with weight. And I'm just saying is that the system itself is profoundly affecting a lot of these people. I know a lot of women and female friends who went into healthcare and they do want to take care of themselves and they had good habits, but at some point things changed. They didn't have time for themselves anymore. They were eating on the run. They weren't taking their food to work anymore. They stopped working out. And then lo and behold, they gained 50 pounds or more. I'm just trying to say that this system at large doesn't promote health, not only for the patients, but for the providers themselves. And I don't think that they can see the perspective of how this looks to the public. Maybe certain people in the public think, oh, it must be so stressful. And that's what they're doing to try to survive. And, oh, our healthcare heroes, God bless them. But what about the people that are watching this whose family members are dying in the hospital and they can't go in to see them? There's a loss of holistic perspective is what I'm trying to say. If I were in that position as a nurse or a doctor, I would understand because I have holistic thinking. I've worked hard to have holistic thinking. I would know there's no way I'm going on a video and dancing when I know that there are people watching this who may have people that are dying here that can't come. Like, I would just know that this is actually not the right thing to do. So I just wanted to share that is that I have compassion for everybody that works within healthcare, but I don't think the healthcare system promotes health for either the patient or the provider.
No. And anyone listening that's like, oh my goodness, that feels attacky. But, your point is right. It's a healthcare system. And I mean, it's glorified on any show you watch on Netflix where doctors and surgeons are pulling 30 hours without a break. Now, I don't know how true that is. These are dramas that I'm watching. But, if that's true, number one, we know a lack of sleep makes you the equivalent of having 4 or 5 standard drinks. So that seems like it'd be crazy and ludicrous to allow someone to do surgeries where they haven't had sleep going in and performing on people's lives, number one. Number two, you're absolutely right. People in the healthcare field should be in a space where they can get good quality sleep because of what they're doing for a job. They should be promoted to have healthy food that they can eat in the cafeteria in hospitals. They should be making sure they're hydrated enough, taking enough breaks. And then it comes down to the fact that we are seriously, and especially in Australia, understaffed and so many patients coming through that it feels like we're a bottleneck of nothing can change. And unfortunately, we're at a point where if nothing changes, we have to step back and create breaks and spaces so healthcare providers can put their health first, become a living example of where we want our patients to do. That's the only way we're going to move out of a sick care system, which is what it is now, if everyone's honest. It's a sick care system and it's not a healthcare system, but it is a huge paradigm shift to move from one to the other. And I don't know if there is an easy way of doing it, but it comes back to what you're talking about and what we're walking through now is the system is not set up for healthcare providers to thrive. And so to your point about making these big paradigm shifts where healthcare providers really do need the tools to have sensitivity, back to your video and those kinds of things, that is just not being taught or brought into this model, which unfortunately feels like it's very geared towards making money versus geared towards patient outcome and patient care, if I'm going to be extremely honest about it and how hospitals work. And I don't know how to get around that. I don't know what the answer is to all of this sort of stuff, apart from what we're talking about here. But they are huge problems in our whole medical system. And I think people need to understand the bigger picture of when you're being told kidney disease can't be cured. Well, doctors get a $500 kickback for every person they put on dialysis. and not all doctors are that way. But, again, I'm not saying that that is a problem with the provider, but the system is not set up for providers to thrive in that environment when you've got big in medical and money incentives built this way and built on people that are tired and stuck and running around the rat race.
Yeah. Yeah. And to clarify, I sometimes forget I need to clarify, is that I deeply love and care for healthcare providers if they've gone into it for the right reason. And what I'm trying to point out is that, these things that may feel triggering, and usually we know this already, that when you have a trigger, usually it's because something within you needs to be addressed in that trigger. I've done this work. It's not pretty. It's not fun, but it's a necessary part of growing up psychologically as a human being. So the thing is that I want our healthcare providers to be healthier. I want the system to change in order to provide them a healthier environment and setting for them to thrive, so they can be that demonstration for their patients. That's what I desire, because I, for many years, laid in that bed as the patient. And I found myself consoling many nurses, even doctors, seeing their unhealthy behaviors and feeling so terribly sorry for this environment that they had to exist in. And what happens, ironically, is in that environment, when it feels like a chaos environment and it's not healthy, you have to go into survival mode. And I've heard many of my friends who are doctors, even pioneering surgeons, say, I feel like a fireman. Now, what kind of environment is a fireman in? Unless he's in the firehouse eating wonderful food with his buddies, he's in a fight or flight survival mode. So if that's the environment that we're educating people to be in, a fight or flight mode, don't you think that's translating into your patients at all? You think that there's a total block between that energy and what's being put out in the rest of the system? I could feel that as a patient very often laying in that hospital bed, is that I was there to heal, and I did not feel like I was in a healing environment.
No, I mean, I broke my leg 2 years ago and had to go into a hospital rehab, and you can't get me out of there fast enough. I had that massive horse riding accident. And again, I mean, their trauma, of course, I want, Western medicine when I've got two major traumas like that. And then just the rehab and all of those kind of things. I had to spend 2 weeks after that riding accident, and there was nothing, you're right, there's nothing healing about that. I had to get food brought in because, I'm like, I'm not eating that. Like, that's not setting me up for healing. And you're in, and again, it's people working very long hours, you're under artificial lighting, all the things that we know don't contribute. All the things I talk about in biohacking: natural light, good, healthy food, fresh air, unfortunately, hospitals are just not set up for that. And so you've just got that environment, and then everything that you've just spoken to, which comes out into a wider berth. Again, we're in a sick care system. We're missing the holistic part about it, which is where healing happens. We would just get such greater outcomes, and I believe we would save a lot of money if we slowly transitioned across to a more holistic version. And I think you'd have happier providers, which is what you're...
And patients. Yeah. It's interesting because, I can't tell you how many times I've been hospitalized and for long periods of time in the past. And I became good friends with certain providers because I'd be there for a month at a time. And I have to be honest with you. Now, yes, I have a history of doing, yoga, teaching yoga and doing spiritual work, but getting to know some of my providers and really finding the good ones, because that's what you have to do when you have a long-term hospital stay, is like, who's going to really take care of me? Where's the one that has the energy to care? Where is she or he? And then when are you coming back? So I know that I'm going to be safe. This is a very normal feeling for many patients that they have. But getting to know many of them, and some would sit with me or come in and chat with me, you can just feel the soul loss. You can feel the soul loss. You can feel not only, can they not give me the care maybe they desire to give because of the schedule, but you can feel that they are not giving that care to themselves anymore. And that impacts, that there's direct correlation, if you want to talk about healing, between that relationship. And you're right. Thinking about a new system that's architecturally different, better lighting, food, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, it feels very daunting. And if we don't want to at least start somewhere and start to create some prototypes, I would love to see some prototypes in some major cities. Like, hey, if this could be a reality, what would it look like? Let's just start doing something like that and start to test the results. Let's see. I think it's a transition we all know we need to go to, but it's such a daunting transition that we're actually doubling down on not doing it, many people, because it's too hard. But in the meantime, we have to stay separate. And I think there at least should be a respectful relationship between holistic healthcare providers and traditional providers. If we can't get to that respectful relationship between those that care within that system, it's going to be very hard for us to evolve and actually take care of our own.
I mean, that's right. If there was a bit of bridge between it, that would cover part of what we're saying, is that holistic healthcare providers that hopefully have also, and to a point, not every holistic healthcare provider that I know is naturopaths are a living example of health. I just want to say that doesn't just go.
Right. Sure.
I know naturopaths that are overweight, that smoke, that drink, like it goes both ways. We are the natural side are not saints either. But I digress, that if there was a better working relationship and we could have the two systems come in synergistically, we could take some of the load off the emergency and leave emergency medicine as just that. I think emergency medicine's amazing, but they're shit at preventative medicine and long-term health. We know that. They don't get training in it. But if there was a better bridge and a better collaboration, number one, we could probably take some of the load off and help people in that very emergency medicine type field have better hours, better breathing, so they can look after themselves and move towards where they need to. And then patients get better outcomes because they're getting all of the other stuff. So, that would help in the interim.
It would help. And I don't think that's that impossible. I mean, we could start, maybe we do need to, it's like, I'm thinking physics now, like I'm getting this picture in my mind. Maybe we do need to stretch a little further apart before there's a way that we can come together more holistically. So maybe there needs to be an admittance that you don't get all of the resources and all of the grants because you excel in these things. Mm-hmm. So you do that. And then let some of the resources go over to this adjunct center within the hospital or a bridge to another space where patients can go get the other aspect of what they need. Like, let's just separate a little further then. But the issue, a psychological issue, a shadow, a blind spot there is that when you've lost yourself in an unhealthy system and you're in that fireman mode, right? And you're like grinding with your friends and you're all in it together. It's like a war, you've gained weight, you're not healthy, you're out drinking. Maybe you have an addiction problem now and you're like just trying to get through it. You don't really want to sacrifice your rewards because you are now living in a reward-based system that will do things for you to make you stay in that dysfunctional system. So it's like to give over some of your hard work and say, you're right. We can't do this all. We aren't the experts that we claim we are in healthcare, right? I've given all of myself and I nearly died for this system. And now I have to admit, we're not really the shit, right? Like we need some help. That's a hard thing to come to terms with when you almost died yourself, trying to be in the system, to say like, we're going to give over some of our work to people actually who are healthier or have other means to try to provide for our patients that we actually can't provide. There's a letting go. There's the shedding of some skin for traditional healthcare to give over, to admit that, and then give that over to the alternative space. So,
and that's where it comes back to really and what you and I talk about all the time, and what you had to do for yourself and what I've had to do, patients have to advocate for themselves at the moment. It's, patients demanding that stuff is probably how we're going to get some of that to change.
Yeah. I mean, I do think it's the patient's voice that has to push the needle to change, which means a lot of patients need to be empowered. They need understanding and education. And also a lot of patients, again, we've all been indoctrinated to prop up, pedestal people who have specific degrees and titles. So the hierarchy of the patient-provider relationship needs to shift into one of true patient-centered care, which is we all have different expertises, but are of equal value amongst this team, including you, the patient.
100%.
So in order for patients to speak up to a doctor, to have the courage to be like, hey, I don't think this, and I actually want to try this, you need a strong patient to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm always, as a healthcare provider, of the belief that no one is a greater expert on the body in front of me that I'm looking at than the patient that's lived in it. So if they have a strong intuition, or they say something to me, or they want to try something, I always back them. I'm like, if as long as it makes sense and, they're not setting their hair on fire or doing something crazy, I'm always like, yeah, you're the one with the expertise in your body, not me. So what do we need to support you to? And sometimes you're indulging something that you think, oh, that may not work. And sometimes the patient just has to go through that to be able to trust you to do other things.
Exactly.
And sometimes the patient is right. And sometimes I'm like, yeah, I would not have done that, but that absolutely worked out. But I'm going to take the bet on the patient because there's no greater expert on you than you. I'm not even going to pretend that I know better.
Yeah. So you know what you just described? A healthy, conscious relationship.
You're right.
Which is where sometimes with someone that's in a relationship, you gotta let them kind of play out what they're insisting to do and let them learn for themselves a little bit. And sometimes you go back and forth and you respect each other. But the problem that we're facing here in the West is that far and few between providers are willing to be open to the patient's subjective feelings and experience. And this is why I promoted so heavily for a long time, is that we need to bring in the subjective experience of the patient into this objective space, not to overrule it. Because objectivity is wonderful. Science is wonderful. But if you don't bring in the patient's experience, not only are you belittling them and you may be acting arrogant, but you're maybe blocking off, like Roger Bannister, something that is trying to break its way through into the collective that you're just saying, no, that's impossible. That can't work.
100%.
Absolutely. So in my feeling, we need a true collective healthcare system awakening. We need a transformation of belief and perspective. We need to mature. We need to understand that there are wonderful things about healthcare, and they do things exquisitely, and there's people who are fantastic. But the system as a whole is missing half of its whole, which is the part of healing and what that entails. Healing isn't just suturing up a surgical spot.
No.
When we're talking about a human being here, not a piece of flesh, not an objective thing. That's the thing. So yeah, never pretty, but I do think that it's steamrolling right into us. I think like virus after virus and this and after this and turbo cancer, it's like, it's hard to deny that we're missing something. And I think AI has come in as a pseudo savior. And now everybody in the healthcare space is like, oh, I've got a grant to write this and AI, and I'm writing AI. I'm like, okay, yet another reward high for you to feel better, because you know that within your system, you are finding it hard to be seen, heard, and be healthy in that system. So you live off of highs, basically, So this is my feeling. We got to stop doubling down. So this is called Ostrich Syndrome, where an ostrich buries his head under the ground, right? So this is a real thing. So the ostrich.
I know, I love it.
This effect, or ostrich, I wrote an article about it actually like 4 years ago. I put it down here. And the fear of change, if anybody wants to check that out. But so ostrich syndrome is a cognitive bias where people tend to avoid information they perceive as potentially unpleasant or negative, even if that information is important or useful. This avoidance is likened to the myth that ostriches bury their head in the sand to avoid danger. And that's what I think the majority of our Western healthcare, I don't know about yours, but this is what I think the majority of the model is doing, is we're burying our hand. We know that something's coming, but we're really trying to avoid the consequences of this change that's coming anyway. That's how it feels to me.
I agree.
This is really difficult. Maybe this is a little extreme, but I just had to say it when I made this. I think our biggest fear is that success and true change is possible. And we'll need to forgive ourselves for potentially harming, going against the Hippocratic Oath, and even contributing to death unknowingly. That's what I think is the bottom line.
No, and you're being very honest in calling it, and it'll be very hard for people to hear, especially providers. But I can't disagree with that. And I shared with you, and I just want to point this story out for people listening of just how it plays out. I had a meeting this morning, and this guy was talking about his brother-in-law with polycystic kidney disease, and he's lost his mum early, so he has given over to the fact that he will die early from PKD. Now, PKD, if you look after your kidneys, we know that you can slow down the progression. And then post-transplant, PKD is gone. Once you have your PKD kidneys taken out, you get a normal set of kidneys. And then if you can look after the transplant and not reject and do all the good stuff that you've been through twice, Stephanie, you can live a long and healthy life. And I've podcasted with quite a few people that have had PKD and transplants and managed to thrive going into it and thrive coming out of it. But this guy was just told that he was going to have an early life and just decided to trash his body all the way up and has had both kidneys removed to speed up the ability to have a transplant. So he's on permanent dialysis 24/7. I can't even imagine. And it's just handed over to the fact that he'll die early. So won't do anything post-transplant, living on energy drinks, all the stuff that we know trashes the kidneys. And I heard that story and nearly burst into tears because I'm like, how has no one given this? And maybe they have, I don't know the person individually, but perhaps no one empowered this individual to take care and look after things so he could have a long and amazing life and look after these kidneys that he'll hopefully be able to get. Like, I just go, there was such a whole other way that this could have been done. And I feel heartbroken for him that he's had the rhetoric and the mindset from apparently a very early age that this will kill him. And that's the end of that. So back to your point about contributing to death unknowingly, I think that if we're not brave enough, we used to get in trouble all the time with Kidney Coach that we were giving patients false hope. And I would say it's an oxymoron. Hope is hope. You can't give false hope. It's impossible. Hope is hope. And that's up to the person to take it on or not. It's not, you don't give people hope per se. People will latch onto something that you say and it will ignite something inside of them. And so the biggest feedback we get from Kidney Coach, interestingly, is that people say you gave us hope. And I'm like, well, we didn't give you hope. You obviously heard something in there that made you feel autonomous and empowered to take something into your own hands and change the rhetoric. But it is forget about the fact that people might get a bump in EGFR or their creatinine levels go down or, like they come off dialysis. That's the biggest feedback we get is hope. And so down to this, unknowingly contribute to death, I think, no SIBO, placebo effect, we've spoken about that before, but I just think when we don't open ourselves up to having a different set of viewpoints or opening our mind up, and you talked about cognitive dissonance, that unfortunately we don't do it deliberately. Providers definitely aren't doing this deliberately, but it's a thing. And we've got to be honest and true with ourselves about how we potentially have contributed to patients doing what I was talking about this patient earlier. And it's not that anyone's done or set out to intentionally do it, by not educating ourselves and not doing all the stuff that you're talking about here, we unknowingly contribute to this. And I think until we can be really honest around that stuff, and it's a really hard one to look at, Stephanie. I mean, you're calling out ultimate truth here. It's going to trigger the crap out of everybody, but it is what it is, right? No, don't apologize, because that's part of your magic, is you are a truth seeker and you're laying the path for change. And until we can have these conversations, nothing's going to change.
Yeah. It's a difficult pill to swallow, so to speak. But I want to just mention this concept of hope is that, and false hope and that whole rhetoric. When you have a disease, there's a 50-50 chance, especially a bad disease. You may live, you may die. In fact, that's the reality that every single human being should live with every day of their life. There is a chance that I could pass away. In fact, I'm not going to get out of this life alive. So what do we do? Right? So what do? We try to do the best that we can while we're here. That means that even if you're diagnosed with a disease, you should still be given all of the hope that you can, and you should still do as much as you can to try to not just simply give in to your diagnosis or to death. We don't want to willingly give in to death. You know, life is a process of entropy as we go along. Like we're getting older, things are happening, right? I'm thinking about a marriage. Like they always say, like, oh, the first year is the honeymoon phase, and from there it just spirals down. Well, it doesn't have to be that way if you're mature and mindful. So insofar as disease, what I'm really starting to understand about the system, again, we can't label everybody does this. It has to be a generalization because I haven't spoken to everybody in every single healthcare system. But generally what I see is that it operates and it infantilizes a lot of people's experience. And that in my mind, I feel that we need to grow up in our understanding of disease and treatment, period. And it doesn't have to be complicated. It can just be, I'm going to try this. I'm really feeling like this may work for me. This is giving me hope. This is prolonging my life now. This is making me feel better during my condition. Like, who's to say that somebody shouldn't do those things when they have kidney disease? If you're meditating or you're doing, changing your diet and you're doing really well and psychologically and emotionally, you feel more at peace and at balance, and your nervous system is more calm. No doctor in their right mind should look at a patient and say, those things don't work. That's insane.
Yeah, no,
it should be this, we don't know what the future holds, but if that's helping you, and that's wonderful, please do more of that.
Yeah, I know.
And for a doctor.
Okay, sorry, keep going.
Yeah. And for a doctor to simply say, we don't know exactly how this is going to go. If you're loving these things and you're, doing fantastic, let's see what happens. And within the patient's mind, if they're over 18, let's use 18 as a general age, is the patient needs to grow up in their understanding of disease too. Is that we don't want to go into the hospital system and need proxy parents because we're so emotionally vulnerable and we're so afraid of death and we're, oh my gosh, and I'll do anything you say. Well, that's not going to help you in the rest of your life, yet alone your disease process that you're in. So in a way, the healthcare system at large, I think it could just use a really a good, healthy dose of maturing.
Can't disagree with you there, Stephanie.
This is a grim picture, but I had to put this in here. I wrote an article a long time ago too, and it was called Signs That You're Not on the Path to Broaden Your Perspective.
Wrong way, go back.
I've discovered that in terms of asking people to change, it's always good to first start out how they're not changing. People can usually identify more with where they're not because that's more visceral. They can feel that than maybe where they need to go. So let's just very simply talk about signs that maybe you're not on a path to broaden your perspective. You have a resistance to change. Resistance to change, even in the mundane. You're just going along with what everyone else is doing. You have a lack of self-reflection, maybe because you don't have time, and then maybe because you're not around the right people. And this, again, when you're in a culture a work environment, even a family environment, that you don't have time to self-reflect, or you're around people that don't feel healthy for you, it's going to be harder for you to evolve. And when I think about the healthcare system, it's a group of people who are in that same system. So in a way, even though they might attack each other or not be all best friends, they're all trying to survive in the same system, which means that, maybe they don't have the time, or again, the people they're around are just still trying to coexist in that system too. So them waking up requires them to do one of the hardest things ever, which is to come out of your culture and to be willing to be questioned by your peers. That's one of the hardest things people have to face in these fields.
100%.
Yeah. So then if you are overly materialistic and have ego-driven goals, you're probably not on the path to broaden your perspective. Maybe your car or your wardrobe, but broadening your perspective and really awakening to be able to change requires you to realize that these things are very tertiary to what's most important. And again, sadly, because we have such a shortage in healthcare, you see incentives to give people more money to get into healthcare. And then people are getting into the healthcare field, not because it's a calling anymore, but because it's profitable.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying they shouldn't get paid for what they do, but again, you have to be called to want to work in the healing field, I feel.
No, I think so too.
Yeah. And then if you're really judgmental and you're intolerant, this is a true sign that you are not on the path to broaden your perspective. Really think about that. If you're still really projecting blame that, Sally over on floor 3 is a real jerk, and did you see this? And are my patients a real a-hole? And if that's you, you're stuck down in the lower nature, sadly. And that's probably a lot because of the environment that you either grew up in or that you continue to be in. So if you've got a lot of emotional turmoil and over or no reaction. So I put that spectrum in there, is that if you tend to be really overreactive, you're probably not on that path to broaden your perspective and find a little more balance. Hence the crazy lady on the seesaw here, right? She's like holding herself in to try to find her balance. And then you have people who just become very apathetic. And that's another quality that you see a lot amongst many systems, but especially in the healthcare and even in ourselves, is when we're just too burdened and we don't want to deal with the emotions. So we just shut them off and we become apathetic. That's not going to help you to grow up and broaden your perspective.
No.
Then you have people who use things like spiritual bypassing, right? And that can be like, oh, I'm, super spiritual, or I just go to church and they take away all my sins so I can still be a jerk at my business or what I'm doing. So you have to be careful that you're not disassociating. Broadening your perspective requires really radical self-honesty and self-reflection, which is the hardest part of this journey, but it's totally rewarding. And then if you have an over-reliance on authority without question, and this is something that I saw, during the COVID era, was that I actually had a doctor say to me, like, oh no, it's fine. The science says, like, again, a lot of that blind belief, because that's the way that it was done back in the day. Mm-hmm. So we've lost the ability to question authority, to dig deeper. So again, if you just really rely on what people tell you to do without question, you're probably not on that path. And then rigid dogmatism will always stop you from broadening your perspective. So I guess the question is, do you want to awaken to a broader perspective? Do you want to understand what holistic thinking is? Do you want to feel better? Or do you like your misery? There's a guy that I know who's like a pastor / spiritual teacher, empowerment guru guy. And he always says, people love their hell. They love their misery. And that's the truth. Sometimes people get addicted to that, the nervous system and the hormones of complaining and judgment. And that's not healthy. I think that's what we need to understand, that there's a much better way to grow up and be a human being. But if you're stuck in that nature, you're not going to broaden your perspective. All right, 2 more slides. So here we got our little beautiful monkeys. So system transformation, in my opinion, is always rooted first in personal transformation. The system is a collective of people, and then the people who run those people. right? So I always feel that we move the needle when we all individually wake up and start to change, and then that starts to influence others. So the 100th monkey effect is a concept suggesting that once a critical mass of individuals in a group adopt a new behavior idea, it speaks rapidly to others. In that Rupert Sheldrake video, I believe it was that one that I linked here, he noted about the 100th monkey effect, that he said it's not, the phenomenon is more so that the impossible thing becomes somehow in the field, in the quantum field, I can't really quite explain, but the more it's done, somehow it's easier for people to adopt, right? It's not just necessarily like a mindset. It's that just the more something is done, it's like those first initial early adopters, right? Like those early pioneers and those early adopters, we should really give them credit, because what they had to overcome as an early adopter is, it's the impossible. They've had to overcome the impossible. So then once it becomes possible, it makes people feel more easily they can do it. So just respect to Roger Bannister throughout this presentation, and anybody who was an early adopter of evolutionary change, because what they've had to go through to really do this, you would understand this, Fiona, is a lot.
Yeah. And I mean, for anyone that doesn't know where the 100th monkey term comes from, it's such a fascinating thing, but they were monitoring a group of monkeys, and I don't know where it was. It might have been Madagascar or something like that. And the monkeys learnt, there was something about how they could open some sort of fruit that they couldn't normally get into. And monkeys learned how to do this.
It was a potato, I think.
It was a
potato. Yeah.
Yeah, it might have been. And then on an island across the other side of the world, within a week, those monkeys figured it out as well. And so it's not even that the monkeys called up or they have TikTok or they got on and watched the other monkeys do it. Yeah. There's something, Rupert Sheldrake will talk about this, and, others obviously worked with Dr. Joe for a very long time. So I do understand the quantum field. It sounds very woo-woo to people that don't understand it, but something happens in the collective that it is translatable. We are all connected, interconnected, that when something changes over here, there is something that morphs in the field, and I'm sure Rupert Sheldrake will talk about it far more eloquently than I'm doing right now, but it makes it believable. So to anyone listening, when you decide that maybe you are going to work at healing your kidney disease, and whatever outcome that is for you, but when you make that decision and you start to put yourself first and change your diet, and Stephanie made a very good point earlier on that it is holistic. I know people think, oh, we'll just take Fiona and Duncan's Kidney Prime and Kidney Advance and that will fix everything. And we say 100 times, no, we don't have a magic bullet. You also need to look at your stress levels and change your diet and look at the drivers, and is your blood pressure under control and all those things. So we're not offering magic cures. We are offering a holistic solution that these will support you with. But when you decide to do that, you put something out into the field. And then when we get these amazing testimonials like Liddy, who was on dialysis for 2 years and managed to come off. Okay, we were told that was impossible. And now I'm starting to see things that even I was like, oh, well, I don't know if you've been on dialysis 2 years, whether we could ever get someone off that. Okay, we've had maybe 6 to 7 patients that we know about that have told us, oh, we're on dialysis for an extended period of time and we've come off it. Now, that is, for me, the 100th monkey and breaking the 4-minute mile, because those things we were all told was impossible, and now we know it's not. So by you deciding to make those changes for yourself, you contribute towards this. And maybe this, like you say, the collective, when the collective reaches a certain critical mass, maybe that's all our job as humans, is to contribute towards a more loving world as we want to see it, by contributing towards that critical mass. Maybe.
Absolutely. I love that. And I thank you so much for all your hard work and everything that you guys have done, and you being those early adopters and getting the kickback that you guys did when you first started. And Oof. You're right, is that at the end of the day, let's just bring up worst case scenario. Let's just go there. It doesn't work. But if you've had the gateway and the model to start to work on yourself emotionally, spiritually, mentally, and you started taking care of yourself and loving yourself in a way that you never did before throughout your disease process, I will tell you right now, and again, this is maybe taboo to say, but I'm not afraid with you, Fiona, and I'm so grateful for that, is that there's another healing that occurs within somebody's self, soul, being that's not physical. And it's so incredibly visceral that I remember even saying when I went through this very long process for myself on my own awakening journey, within my heart and soul, there was a knowing I have healed something so profound within my lifetime. It is so profoundly meaningful. It actually takes away that fear of physical death when that moment comes. There's something so much deeper that can heal within someone. And if they get that, if that's the least they get, we've done a fantastic job already. So any provider, any doctor, any professional that poo-poos that soul healing, that deep, deep love for the self and connection with everyone, and really trying to take care of the self as best as one can and finding that peace within, I just don't know what to say to anyone who would poo-poo that. So if that's the worst case scenario, I think you guys are doing fabulous.
I'm so glad you spoke to that. And I know that's been a hard journey for me. And people listening, I've got spinal cord injury and MS. And it's been a hard thing because it's not like I've miraculously been able to reverse a spinal cord injury. And so, you know, chronic pain, can't walk properly. But, and I know you can relate to this, in that space, you have to learn to live your best life. And I have two options. I can be a victim and complain and moan, or I can get up every morning, drag myself into my ice bath, and then go to the gym and work out, and then find ways to better contribute to other people's living and all of those things. And it's only been in the last couple of years where what you just described has happened for me, where I'm like, I may never reverse this. I may have to spend the rest of my life wondering if I'll end up in a wheelchair or not being able to walk properly and being in chronic pain. But because I've been down the rabbit hole and the journey and all the other stuff that has happened because I've had to deal with something like this, I wouldn't take it back. It's been amazing. I've had such an amazing journey. And as you and I have both spoken to in this video, I'm far more compassionate and empathetic and can connect with patients on a far deeper level because of what I've gone through. And really some of the life lessons and those sort of things are priceless and wouldn't have come without what I've been through. So, you know, like you say, it's a soul journey. And sometimes as healthcare providers, you're right, we have to let go. And it was one of the things I had to learn with Dr. Joe, and it was a hard one I haven't reconciled yet, if I'm really honest, was, you know, I've heard him every now and then say, well, if you haven't healed, you're just not that good. And I'm like, oh, it's a very dangerous thing to say, because healing doesn't necessarily equal physical. Sometimes the healing is exactly what you said. And for me, my healing hasn't been a physical transformation. And I've had more coherence healings, including people like Dr. Joe working on me. My healing hasn't looked physical. It's been a very deep soul healing, far more than the physical. And you're absolutely right. As physicians and healthcare providers, we can't say that if someone doesn't get the physical outcome metric that we're looking for, that we failed by not providing all the other stuff, because sometimes the healing will look not how we want it. Sometimes the healing doesn't look how we want it to look. The healing will lie outside of that. And that's not for us to dictate as healthcare providers.
Yeah, it's brilliant. And I think the last thing I'll say is the yoga teacher wants to come out within me now is, and my personal experience. I mean, I've lived more than half my life with autoimmune disease and kidney disease, okay, and 2 transplants and years on dialysis. And what I will say is this: humanity in general, especially non-spiritual individuals, put so much emphasis on the physical because we think that this is it. Like we're fighting to stay alive. And you see, you know, even now, such a proclivity towards, you know, terms like longevity. And I love longevity, but not at the expense of understanding the soul and the importance of the death process. Like we're not trying to fight the inevitable. It's that we're trying to take care of ourselves better and to see what's possible. That's different. Can we prolong life?
I like the word health span, not longevity. Yeah.
Right. But I will say to you that in my mind, what comes to mind are several women friends that I have. And very recently, I lost a friend to cancer. And, but she was a profound Jungian psychologist and shadow worker and self-reflection and that inner work, right? That inner work. She was such a profound, beautiful life artist and musician. And she really lived her life in a way that was based from her soul. It just like this thing just came out from her all the time. And she faced the messiness publicly and talked about it and never was trying to project an image. And all that shadow work and inner work and healing that she did on herself didn't physically save her life. But at the end of her life, there was an incredible, peaceful transition because she had already found her soul in this life. Beautiful. And again, it's just something within the healthcare system that it, not to get religious, but it can come down to if you believe that this is it and it's just about the preservation of the physical body and there's nothing else, well, then that's all you know to be true. That's all you've ever experienced. And that righteousness to keep the body intact would align with your core values. But to people who have experienced more, and the soul tribe out there, and the people who understand that we are an interconnected, conglomerate of mental, physical, spiritual connection with others, just the holistic mind, the holistic thinking mind understands that physical is a part of our being. And yes, we want to stay physical as long as possible. Don't get me wrong. But the issue is that there's nothing, and I say this on my website page. And again, this is difficult, but it's in hindsight because I've been through the journey twice. And so I'm looking back. So those of you who haven't been at this place in your journey, it may be a little hard to digest, but I'm going to say it is that my spiritual awakening, my inner journey, the inner work that I did on myself was far harder actually than a lot of the physical, but that much more rewarding. And that to me, that healing and reconnection of my soul with my body and just that reconnection of my parts back together, I wouldn't give that up for anything. And to me, that's healing. And when somebody has a physical illness, it is a prime opportunity for an all-encompassing healing.
Absolutely.
So we got to embrace that. And that's what I love about the holistic field is that, and functional medicine and what you do is that there's no poo-pooing of the physical. We're not talking about transcending the body we're not talking about that. We understand and value everything that goes on with this physical body and we need healthcare. But there is a healing that goes beyond that. And your course, your program, I've done it, offers all of those bits in addition to the supplements that you offer. And that together, I think, is a profound combination for this movement of healing kidney disease. And I hope that this continues to progress. So thank you so much for listening to my presentation.
Oh, thank you, Stephanie. It's one that's been needed to be said. And yeah, it's a hard one, I think, for some people to listen to because we pull out some facts. And if you're listening to this and you have listened all the way to the end, firstly, thank you. And two, if anything triggered you or you felt uncomfortable by some of the stuff we point out, I invite you to sit down and have a look at that and introspect with that and just see where that sits and what that might have brought up for you. I know, I've often felt as a fraud. It's taken me a long time not to feel as a fraud, that the fact that I've got a long-term health condition, autoimmune disease that I've not been able to reverse. And really it comes down to all the stuff that we've just spoken about, like sometimes healing for people will look different. And to know, and to your point, Stephanie, that sometimes what we have, because I'm always, people are like, oh, no, we need to see you as a naturopath. And I'm like, well, I haven't been able to heal this. But it is people connect because people are always like, but you understand what I've been through. And I realize the healing in the relationship that you have with your practitioners, when you've got a practitioner who will listen and be all in, is just as valuable. In fact, I think they've done studies on this, that if you like your healthcare practitioner and you connect with them, I think you're like 80% more likely to have some sort of healing. That, there's a lot to be said for that. And so anyone going through this and your lived experience, and then how you can connect to others, and just what you have to offer the rest of the world when you have to go through a health challenge, please don't underestimate that either. So your journey is very special and unique to you, and everything that Stephanie just spoke about in that video, when you can take that aspect with it and look at the uniqueness of your journey and how you can become the full expression of yourself through that, then healing becomes such a beautiful thing to go through.
Mm-hmm. I look at my disease process as a gift and an opportunity. And I think that's one thing that has opened up so much inner peace for me along my journey. And who doesn't want to have inner peace when they're going through something really challenging? And believe it or not, you can do both. You can do both simultaneously. You can be going through something really challenging and still be at peace with it and not be really crazy. But it's a process, because you have to unearth why you're having all those feelings. But to see illness, any illness, as a divine teacher, and that there's that in essence, there's nothing wrong. This is part of my journey, and I'm navigating it as best as I can. And yes, I'd love it to just magically go away and have my life be perfect, but that's not how life is. And I'm going to choose to look at my illness as a divine teacher, to remind me every day of how lucky I am and what I can do, and to keep me grounded. And so just that mindset shift is really profound. Instead of looking at it as such a limitation, to just be like, this is one of my best teachers.
Yeah. And it's, I'm in this field and it's taken me a very long time, but it is the greatest gift you can give to yourself when you can at least shift your mindset that way. Not an easy feat, but again, life's work, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. Accepting all of yourself has been a long journey for me. I come from a lineage of wannabe perfectionists and people pleasers, and, showing up in my field and having a condition, doesn't look the best, but that's just me. This is an illusion that I'm saying to myself. It's not real. I feel that nobody has respected me less because of my journey. It's just the lie I'm telling myself that, it doesn't look perfect, So this disease, my condition requires me to just constantly accept myself, warts and all, and disease and all, and just still be the best that I can, and remind me that I'm human. All I can be is human,
Exactly. I couldn't have said it better. Stephanie, you're a treasure to humanity as always. Thank you for calling out the real stuff. And, I want to just mention again, it's not easy to be the one shining a light. And I know you've been wanting to do this forever, and I know you started to do it in the medical field and you had quite a pushback, but what you're trying to implement and how you see it changing. And I know you're met with a lot of resistance, and I feel lucky that we have snaffled you up under our wings and take you on that way. Because
Fiona, it is with love.
Yeah.
Honestly, I love healthcare providers. I couldn't have survived without many of them. So it's just, the kickback is hard, because you got kickback too. The kickback is hard when you're really coming from a place of love, but people can't see it that way. But I've learned to get strong enough to say that they're not ready to see that actually I love them and I'm trying to help.
Well, and I think that's the thing, and I mean, this is my modus operandum, is I'm very much, I miss the gene to lie. It's missing in my neurology. I'm a very honest person. And sometimes I've learned that when you tell the truth, people don't like it and you'll lose people. But I believe, as what I hear you saying, is being honest and speaking the truth is the ultimate act of love. Because saying in that moment that you trust the person enough that you're speaking to, that you can leave them with, and it's just our truth. I'm not saying it's ultimate truth, but that you trust them enough that you can leave them with this. And I think when you have the capacity to be that honest, and you're not people pleasing and you're not placating, and you can say, I love you enough to see that there are faults here, and I'm holding you to a higher standard because I love and care and I'm authentic and I respect you enough to hold you to that standard. I mean, it's the same in relationships. You don't want to be with a partner that says yes to you all the time and lets you get away with shitty stuff, because that's going to blow up. You want someone that's going to call you on your stuff, that you can have a level-headed conversation with and grow together. And, you know, that's what you're doing with the healthcare system. So I do see it as an act of love. And as a very high level of love and integrity. And so I invite anyone that doesn't see it that way, and I don't think anyone would, to sit down and have a look at that. But I think when we are honest with ourselves and with others, that is a loving act. I don't see it any other way.
Yeah, I think we're attempting to move into some sort of awakening in relationship. I mean, I know so many people who, like you said, in relationship have struggled. And it's the same thing in the systems. It's the same thing with the patient and the provider. And it's just about all of us understanding how we show up and where do we want to go? Really sit with yourself and ask, like, do you want better? Then we got to move better. And hopefully that's what you guys are, you know, helping people to move towards. So thank you so much for having me.
As always, we love having you. I will, for anyone that's interested in learning more about what Stephanie does, I'll put the link in below. You can definitely book on a one-on-one coaching call with her. She's amazing. For anyone that's going through dialysis or transplant that needs to have an advocate or wants to understand how post-transplant or dialysis they can maybe do better for themselves and feel more empowered to navigate the healthcare system, Stephanie is your go-to. I'll also put a link to all the videos that Stephanie's referenced in there. And so you can have a watch of those. Please make sure you hit like and subscribe. That way you'll get notified anytime we put up a new podcast. If there's any topic that you want Stephanie and I to discuss, put it in the comments and we'll be happy to tackle it. And if you want to know more about what we do, head to www.kidneycoach.com and you'll find us on Instagram and Facebook under the same names. Stephanie, thank you again. We will be podcasting together on another topic in a couple of weeks. And for all of our community out there listening, thank you for being part of our community. We hope you find this valuable, and good luck with your healing journey. Remember to be your authentic selves. Bye.